everyone, I'm Rachel from Wild Backyard Soaps. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm guessing you want to learn how to make soap. So, I'm going to show you how to make cucumber mojito soap. It's one of my favorites. And I will say this, if you want to learn how to make soap, if you've never made soap before and don't know anything, I would highly recommend watching more than just this video because there are multiple techniques to making soap, lots of different ingredients and recipes that you can try. So don't just go from this video. Definitely watch this. It shows you the basics and one technique that you can use, but there are lots of little things that I'll try to mention, and you'll want to go watch some other beginner soap making videos as well, just to make sure you're not missing anything. So first off, we're at my herb garden here. A lot of it has overgrown, but this is my spearmint and peppermint that I put in a couple of summers ago, and the awesome thing about mint, it grows really easy. I haven't had to hardly do anything. The root system just spreads underground and more mint keeps popping up in a larger area every summer. So I'm going to grab just a few handfuls of this for us to use in the bottom half of this bar, just to give it a little of extra scent, exfoliation, and a little bit of extra color as well. It's not going to hold its bright green, it's going to turn darker, but it'll still look really nice in the soap at the finished product. The weather is so nice today that I decided to do a few batches of soap facing part of my backyard. So if you don't know what you need to make soap, I would highly recommend watching my video of the soap making supply list first. This is going to be the actual techniques and making the soap. So watch that one first if you haven't seen it already, and let's get started. So I have my recipe ready to go. I've got all my supplies out. First thing is safety. You want to make sure that you have closed-toed shoes, you have your skin covered. I'm going to have long gloves on, have eye protection, and make sure you're in a well-ventilated area away from kids, pets, and distractions because you are going to be handling sodium hydroxide, which is lye. It can burn and it can have strong fumes. So that is the biggest thing that scares a lot of people about making soap, but it doesn't need to scare you. You just need to make sure that you are prepared before you get started so that way you don't slip up. And then, of course, if you were to get lye on you, rinse, 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 rinse. The solution to pollution is dilution. That's what I used to tell my students in my lab days. So let's get suited up here. And we live right by a trail, so there's a four-wheeler going by right now I can hear. And my dog might accidentally bark too because we have to have him tied out right now because he got sprayed by a skunk a couple nights ago. So he smells really bad and we can't let him in the house. So if he barks, I'm sorry, we'll get through this. Okay, so I have some heat-resistant containers. I just use mason jars, and this is what we're going to make our lye solution in. And I have them labeled, and I just keep using the same ones. Sometimes I'll have more than one batch going at a time, but you want to make sure that this is just your dedicated lye solution. Okay, got my scale on, and you always want to make sure that you tare, T-A-R-E, meaning that it's accounting for the weight of the container when you're measuring. That's just kind of, I know most people know that, but I just wanted to say it. So when you're making your lye solution, it has to be a liquid plus lye, and you should be entering all of that into SoapCalc or another online calculator to make sure your recipe is correct. But you want to use some kind of liquid. Now this time, instead of using water, we're actually going to use cucumber juice because this is cucumber mojito. And I have noticed that the fumes are way less because it doesn't heat up as much when I actually start it with ice cubes instead of just room temperature water or other solution. So I'm going to mostly do cucumber juice ice cubes right now. And we need, for my recipe, I'm doing 88 ounces, which is 5.5 pounds. So I need 16.2 ounces of cucumber juice. And I left the peel in when I was blending this. These are garden cucumbers. I left the green in just for a little extra fun color. All right, so I don't have a lot more room, so I'm gonna do the rest with water to help melt it and make a little more space. Okay, so we are up to the amount that we need for our liquids. Now I have a separate mason jar that I always use for the lye. So I'm going to re-tare that. So it's at 0, and we need 9 ounces on the dot for lye. And this usually comes in pellets, so it's nice and small and easy to dissolve. Whoops. Spilled a tiny bit on the table. So that's where you want to be careful and wear gloves, and make sure that you go through with like a vinegar rag to help neutralize and wipe this up before you just touch with your bare skin. So I'm almost to 9. Okay. Got some birds going crazy outside right now. Hope that's not too distracting. Okay, so here's one of the biggest safety things. We are ready to mix. You never pour water into the lye. That's bad. Pour the lye into the water. And some people do like halfway and stir and add some more. It just kind of depends. Since I'm working with ice cubes, it just needs a minute. The reaction makes it heat up pretty fast. So this will start melting here. So at first it's just kind of slow chopping it up and working it in. Soap making takes a lot of patience. This is not a fast process. You have to block off a good 2 hours of time from start to finish, from making your solutions until actually pouring and letting the soap cure, and then of course another 4 to 6 weeks before you can really use it. All right, that's starting to get a lot more liquidy, so I'm going to add more of the lye. The nice thing too about doing ice cubes for a lot of it is it does cool down and get to your optimal temperature range a lot faster. You want it to be, well, some people do room temperature. It really depends on what you're working with. If your recipe has a higher sugar content, like if you have some honey or milks or things like that, you might want to start at a little lower temperature. But a standard soap recipe, you want both of the oil mixture and the lye solution to be within about 10 degrees of each other is ideal. And then anywhere from like 95 to 120 degrees. I usually stick right around 100 to 110. Okay, that's getting really liquidy now. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of that. And when I do this in my basement, I usually just set these up in the windowsill with the window open to make sure that there's ventilation and not going to get knocked over. Okay, that looks like it's well incorporated now. A lot of the pellets are not dissolved yet. It just takes a little bit of time. So I'm going to let this sit. I'll set it aside over here out of the way and get started on the oils. All right, since I'm not handling lye, I get a little bit hot sometimes, so I'm going to take these back off. Up to you if you want to keep on more for safety. So now let's measure our oils. So I'm going to tare this again. So we're at 0. So we have several different oils we're using this. It's going to be 30% tallow, so my recipe 18.9 ounces. And I went ahead and microwaved to get this to soften up a little bit. I'm going to grab spatulas are going to be your best friend. It's good to have many of many spatulas and spoons on hand. Actually, I'm not going to have this in here. It's going to be in the way, so let me re-tear again. Okay, so this is beef tallow, organic grass-fed beef tallow, but if you don't want to use tallow, a similar comparable would be palm oil, if you can find a sustainably sourced one. Otherwise, some other comparable options would include shea. Otherwise, I would say you don't want to, especially if you're new to soap making, don't start modifying recipes until you've done your research. And plus, you will always want to re-enter it into a calculator like soapcalc.net to make sure that you have the correct amount of lye to fully saponify or turn all the oils into soap. So let's see if we can, I'm going to end up needing more than one container here. Okay, we're at 10. Little glob of something. Okay. This is one of the toughest parts, is just measuring out the oils, especially the solids. And you want to be as accurate as you can. It'd be nice if you had a scale that went to 2 decimal places, but 1 decimal place is fine. Most recipes are going to have a small percentage of what's called superfat, and that is just to ensure that you have a little bit of oils left over above and beyond the lye that was in there, to add some moisture and to make sure that we for sure used all the lye, so it's not going to burn you and be unsafe. Okay, so I got my tallow in. I'm going to tare again, and I also need 18.9 of olive. And I'm using extra virgin olive oil. You can use pomace as well, which is like the second pressing, so it's not as high quality, and it can affect it slightly. So extra virgin would be ideal. In this case, I'm making a green soap, so this green color in the extra virgin is going to look really nice with it. So it'll be a nice pure soap. And then I need 17 ounces of coconut. This is just standard 76 degree organic virgin coconut oil. Coconut oil is a great cleanser in soap. So like it really does a good job cleaning, but can almost dry out your skin if you use too much. So most recipes you'll notice don't go above 33% on that. Okay. Hemp for some added fun green color to this. And hemp is just great for your skin. Got 5 ounces for this. Using up some bottles today. And then a lot of recipes are going to have just like somewhere around 3 to 5% of castor oil, and that helps add some extra fun bubbles to your soap. So all of my oils are now measured, and I like to use a double boiler. So I have a pot on a single burner that I can just plug in anywhere. So I'm going to set this in there to get the rest of these solids melted and get it to be around 110. This is going to take some patience and a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and then we'll come back when both solutions are ready, so that way you can see the actual making of the soap. It's about 15-20 minutes later. Everything is about at the temp we want it now, so I'm going to go ahead and suit up again. And to get it within 10 degrees of each other, it's okay if you need to put the lye solution into the double boiler system. I just have a pot with water that's hot, so I stick the bowl of oils in there until it's at the right temperature, and then I might stick the lye solution in the jar in there for a little bit as well if it needs to reheat, because sometimes it'll actually cool down a little too much while waiting for the oils to heat up. So that's just something that it can happen. That's okay. So I'm using my infrared thermometer to get the temp, which is really helpful so you're not actually sticking it in anything. Okay. So this is saying 89 right now. It was just saying 94 like 2 seconds ago. It's still warm enough. If it's a little bit cooler, it gives us more time to work anyways, so it should still be fine. And then here's the lye solution. So you have to keep it cool in a way because even from the ice cubes, it still kind of browns. It can burn. Like if you're doing milk in your solution, it can kind of burn it, or even coffee or tea or anything else. So sometimes people only do like half the amount with the lye, as long as it's the ounces of the liquid is more than the ounces of the lye, because you need at least a 1-to-1 ratio to completely dissolve the lye. But sometimes they'll add the rest of the liquid in with the oil so it doesn't burn it. But this is okay. It's not like scorched and it doesn't smell bad or anything. So one optional thing you can add that I often do to my soaps to help them harden up and be smoother is add sodium lactate. Usually about a teaspoon per pound of soap. So this is a 5.5 pound batch. So I'm just going to do 5 teaspoons. And you usually add that to your lye solution shortly before combining. So in the meantime, while I was letting everything get to temp, I prepped the rest of my materials. So I have some dehydrated limes that I'm going to stick in the tops. And I got my mold right here. And I have added every inch, I put a mark. So that way I can evenly distribute my decorations on top, my inserts, to make sure that I can cut them and they'll be equal weights later. And then I have a little tea strainer thing with some charcoal powder in it because I'm going to try sprinkling a little pencil line halfway down. Woo! The grasshopper just jumped on me. And then I measured out my essential oil, so it's about 2 parts lime to 1 part spearmint because the spearmint scent is so strong. This is just essential oils, but the spearmint is almost overpowering, and citruses tend to lose their scent over time, so that's why I'm doing twice as much lime as spearmint in this batch. And then I took those mint leaves that I harvested and just blended them up with a little bit of distilled water. So these are ready to add for half of my batch. So we're going to get it to trace and then split it between 2. So we'll do the bottom half with the mint leaves and then the top half just natural color. Okay. I always do like an extra mental check first before we combine these two together, because once that happens, we're making soap, baby. And I usually have paper towels nearby, so they're right over here. I should get them closer just in case. I am a very messy cook and soap maker. Okay, so it is go time. Oops, okay. So I like to get these spatulas out of the way at first because you're going to be mixing with your immersion blender first. So I'll set this aside because we will need the spatula. We're pouring the lye solution into the oil solution. Try to get as much of it as you can out. If there's a little drop left, that's okay. So then I set this aside so it doesn't get touched until I'm able to rinse it later. Just making sure I don't bump anything here. So I don't know if you can see, I may have to bring this closer for this part just so you can see what trace looks like. Let me hold this here. Okay. You kind of blend on and off. Until you get what's called a light trace. So you can kind of like trace and you'll see a little pattern on top. And usually everything starts to look well incorporated. The thing is, you don't want to over mix because the more you blend, the faster it thickens up and then you don't have as much time to work with it. So it's better to under mix, and then especially if you're splitting the batches to do some different colors and other additives to it, you can always mix more once you have it split, but you can't unmix. So you don't want your batter to seize up or do crazy things. So see, this is already starting to just thicken up a little bit on its own. So I'm not going to blend it a whole lot more before I pour off half of this. Okay, that's looking good. So I'm going to set the camera back down and then pour off half of this batch into my other bowl so I can add my mint. So I have a smaller bowl here because we're not adding, like, we're going to do about half and half for this one. And if you want to be accurate and consistent, if you're doing this more than once, or if you care, like, you'd want to put this on a scale and make sure it was half your batch, but I'm just kind of eyeballing it. All right. Let's see. Okay. So now I'm going to add in half of my essential oils. You don't want to add the oils until you're ready to pour. I've learned that the hard way. If you add your essential oils to this other part too, it's going to start thickening before you have a chance to work with it. So I'm going to add about half of it to this part. Ooh. A trick, you can put a bamboo stick over this while you're pouring fragrances and essential oils, so that way it doesn't like drip down the side of the jar like what I just did. I just forgot to grab one. And here's my mint leaves that I'm adding into this. So the mint will probably end up turning like a brownish color. Like, it's not going to stay a nice, fun, bright green or anything. That's okay. I like natural colors in soaps. Sometimes I'll use micas or fragrance oils, but for the most part, I try to stick with all natural because it's going on your skin. Your skin is going to absorb some of it. I like to know what I'm putting on and in my body as much as possible. Okay. Now, I'm going to pour this to basically fill up about halfway, but I need it to be a little bit thicker to set up because I'm going to sprinkle this charcoal powder on top of it to give a little like pencil line. And I want it to set up nicely then and not break through when I pour the top half in. So for this particular batch, you do actually want to mix more and do like a medium to heavier or thicker trace. So getting it closer to like a little lighter than pudding. The less you mix, the better. Like, I should have maybe waited a minute before adding the essential oil, because the more you mix, it reacts with the lye, and then sometimes it can lose some of its strength. Especially, like I said, the citruses. But this, I can smell the lime. That's good. Sometimes it'll thicken up pretty quickly, and other times it takes a little while. So this one is moving a little bit slower. Like I said, patience. It starts to thicken up exponentially near the end. But this is a lot of the times in my other videos, and what you'll see in other soap making videos is they tend to just kind of speed through this part. So then you don't really have a good idea of the actual timeline that it takes. So I'm just kind of leaving this one straight video so you can see the full process. It's still kind of thin. Yeah, I should have waited a little longer on the essential oils, but this is a learning video, right? It just shows you that we're all human and we all make mistakes, especially in our first few batches. I have made a lot of the mistakes in the books. But learning the hard way is sometimes valuable and the best way. Okay. we'll just go with it. So I'm going to pull my mold over closer so you can see what's going on here. So low and slow is the way you pour most of the time to reduce bubbles. And just so it doesn't splatter everywhere. I'm going to assume that this table is level. Okay, we're almost to the halfway. If I end up with a little bit of extra soap batter, oops, I'm dripping. I often end up having just like another little mold to the side that I'll pour some of the extra in, and then I just use that for myself or give it to a friend. Alright, I actually guessed just about right on that. And it was still thin enough that when I poured it, it's making a nice, like, smooth layer, which is what I was going for. So I don't want to waste any here, since we're close enough to using the whole portion exactly. Okay, that's a nice, smooth layer. I'm pretty excited about that. Looks great. Let me set my stuff aside here so I have more room. The nice thing about cleanup is as long as you don't have anyone that's going to try to lick the bowl, you can leave it and let it sit for a day or two until it turns into soap. And even if you do it right away, you just rinse and it's clean. Especially if you have dedicated soap making stuff, which I would highly recommend. Okay, I'm going to do a little chalk line. So I'm going to take this tea thing here and sprinkle some charcoal. Oh, of course, it's windy. Breeze picks up right when I do this. That is just my life, seriously. Okay. So I missed just a tiny bit along the edge, so when I cut it, it's not going to be perfectly beautiful, but still very nice and lovely soap. So I'm going to let this just sit for a couple minutes to start toughening up before we carefully add the second layer on. So while that sits, we can go ahead and prep the other half of the batch. If I can play origami here, or Tetris. Okay. See, even though I barely mixed, this is already starting to thicken up quite a bit, I've noticed. So this one, like I said, we're not adding any extra colors or anything, just essential oils. Yep, this is starting to thicken up quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add this fragrance in. I don't know why this one... Soap is always a mystery. It'll do the same thing multiple times and every time it behaves differently. Okay, so that fragrance, or the essential oils, did loosen it up some, so we're good. Florals can kind of make it seize up, and I made a lemon basil batch recently, and I literally added it in, and it immediately went, it just seized right up on me. I'll fast forward for a little bit and wait. It's holding pretty good. I don't want to tip it too much, but I think we can carefully add the second layer now. So the trick with this, I'm actually going to use the wider spatula, I think. Low and slow once again, but when you're trying to pour a layer on top of another layer without it breaking through, you just want to hold that spatula and pour it right over the spatula and let it very, very, very gently fall on top of that. Can I do two things at once? Can I talk about it and do it at the same time? That is a great question. So ideally you want to take the mold and tap it a few times to, whoops, spilled some more. Tap it a few times to get the bubbles out. But in this case, I'm kind of letting this thicken up so that I can do a little bit of a decoration on top. There's a squirrel eating pine cones in the tree and dropping them onto our roof. So many noises. I said distraction free, right? Okay, so this is overflowing the mold at this point. I'm gonna leave this to thicken up just a little bit before I form it more. So I'm gonna go grab my other mold for leftover. All right, I'm gonna take my gloves and goggles off now so I have a little more dexterity for this last part. Most of the dangerous part is over with. It's not fully saponified. That's why I have to let it sit for 2 or 3 days before you unmold. Then it will be fully saponified, but then you let it cure for about 4 to 6 weeks until it's nice and hard, so it's going to last even if it gets hit by water or sits in water for a little bit. So this is starting to thicken up. Let me grab a clean spatula. I'm just going to bring some of it up towards the middle. Make a nice fun little peak. And because of the wind and my messy charcoal sprinkling, a little bit of the charcoal is kind of streaking up. That's purely aesthetic. That just shows I am an imperfect soap maker. But it's all good. Still will be usable. I'll still be able to sell this on my Etsy shop and share with friends and family. So that's a fun little top right there. And then I'm going to take some dehydrated lime slices and slip one right in the middle. So like I said, I have my markings here so I know like for every inch. I'll bring the camera over so you can see this part up close, just for fun. So the last part for now is to prevent soda ash. So that's any of the lye that's on the surface. It'll react with the oxygen in the air. And you don't want that to happen because then it leaves kind of like a white powdery look to it. There's nothing wrong with this soap, it just doesn't look as cool. So to prevent that and to get it to go through what's called gel phase, to get it to like make the colors pop and make the whole soap process go a little bit better, you want to get it on a heat source. So you can set it on a heating pad, or you can turn your oven on ahead of time to like 200 degrees and then turn it off and then pop the soap in there for like 30 minutes, or you can leave it overnight if you're not using the oven. And you want to make sure you can cover it in some form. Now I have a cover for this particular mold, but sometimes when you're doing decoration on the top, your cover might not fit on. So I'm fairly certain, I'll very gently test this. Yeah, it's hitting the line before it's closing. So what I'm gonna have to do instead for this one is spray it down with some isopropyl alcohol. The higher the percentage, the better. It will come out. And that provides a temporary surface to protect against soda ash happening. And of course, it'll just evaporate later. Another thing that I will do with this particular batch, if you can't cover it like directly with a lid, you could just put like a cardboard box over it and then put some blankets over top of that if you don't have a heating pad. Anything to kind of help keep it warmer while it's gelling and doing its thing. So then like within 24 hours you can have all that uncovered and let it sit for another day or two if you need to, until it's hard enough that you can unmold it and cut it without damaging it, because it's still going to be soft. That's what that cure time is for. So I'm going to take this inside and put it on my heating pad downstairs and cover it with a box and then some blankets over top. And I'm only going to leave the heating pad on for up to 30 minutes and then you turn that off, because otherwise it'll overheat and it could bubble up and crack, and that could make it, it won't ruin it, but once again, it's an aesthetic thing. You want it to look nice while you're at it. So that is it. If I think of anything else, I'll put it in the description below. But this is how you make soap. Not so bad, right? I'll post lots more videos on my channel where I'm not necessarily describing all of the instructions, but it will show you how to do it and share any cool ingredients I'm adding in. And you can have a lot of fun with soap. Like I've said in my intro video before of how I got started with all this, it really satisfies my science brain. It satisfies my creativity. This is something that's affordable, it's better for you, you know the ingredients that are in it, it's eco-friendly, makes a great gift. I mean, there's a lot of other things you can do with a bar of soap too, which I have in another video as well. So win-win. This is just a really fun thing to do at home, and how cool that you can tell your friends, look, I made soap. It's a really useful skill to have. So thank you again for joining me. I know this is a long video, but that's just the life of making soap. And please subscribe. I will see you next time in another soapy adventure. One more very important thing. Of course, we will unmold and slice this baby and see how it looks. So, be back in a second for you. For me, I have to patiently wait a few days. It's now been 3 days, so I'm going to try to unmold this right now. If you're worried about your soap still being too soft and you don't want to damage it, it's totally okay to wait several more days before trying to unmold it, because you don't want to damage it if at all possible, and it'll still be just fine and easy to cut. So let's give this a try. If you can tell on the end there, this is still a little bit too soft, so I kind of dented up the ends. I mean, I always leave a little extra on the sides anyways to trim, just in case that happens. So you can always trim around the edges once they harden up a little bit, and that'll help clean up any messed up spots. And then you can see, if you remember, when I was sprinkling the charcoal for the charcoal line, the wind picked up right when I did it, and so it kind of got stuck on the sides of the mold, so I'm going to have to cut off the very edges anyways just to clean this up a little bit. But I think, even though it's kind of soft, it's out now. Let's go ahead and try cutting this just to see what the inside looks like. I'm going to be using a soap cutter that has a nice string right here, but you can totally use a knife. That's fine. I just like this because I feel like I can't cut straight lines, and I feel like it kind of gets stuck on the knife sometimes. Alright, so I'm going to trim off this edge right here to clean it up. And then if you're using a string cutter, you'll want to clean it between almost every single time that you cut. And if you have any decorations on top, little leaves or flowers, things like that, you'll want to turn it sideways, because otherwise when you cut it, it can drag those pieces all the way through and leave lines on the sides, and then it just doesn't look very nice. Okay. I'm going to set this down for just a second. So this is our finished piece right here. It's a little ugly lime on the end, but still looks nice. So there's a nice smooth chalk line in the middle. And then see how it's a little bit messy on the sides. I'm going to go ahead and trim that off now. And then if you wait and let it cure for a few weeks, then you could take a vegetable peeler and go around the edges to kind of clean them up some. But I like to wait till it's harder so it doesn't get damaged during that part. So now is the most patient waiting part of all of this. You need to set this in a cool, dark place that is hopefully as dry as possible and let this cure for at least 4 weeks, better to be closer to 6 weeks or more. So this will dry out and harden, and if you're really motivated and serious about curing your soaps, I would highly recommend getting a dehumidifier. I have one that I use down in my basement, and then after these are cured, I store them in a shoebox stacked up in my utility room, because that's just the nature of the tiny house that we live in. Thank you again for joining me on this lesson. I hope this was really helpful, and I will leave my email in the description box, so if you want to email me if you have any questions, or you can post something in the comments. Thank you again for subscribing and supporting small businesses like mine, and I hope you'll join me again soon for more soapy adventures once you get some more experience. See you soon!